Welcome to the Genesis in Greek Art series. In part 1 of this series, we will see that while Genesis describes the early events and people in the history of mankind, Greek art depicts those very same events and people, but from an opposite perspective, the way of Cain. It's the serpent side of Eden. In contrast to the Judeo-Christian tradition, the Greeks did not believe that the serpent deceived Eve in paradise, but rather that it enlightened her, and through her all of mankind. The couple that Genesis refers to as Adam and Eve the Greeks called Zeus and Hera. According to Genesis, Adam and Eve were the first couple, the father and mother of all humanity. According to the Greeks, Zeus and Hera were the first couple, the father and mother of all humanity. Adam and Eve were a brother-sister, husband-wife pair. So were Zeus and Hera. The Greeks worshipped Hera as the goddess of marriage. Because she is Eve, the first woman to be married. The Greeks also worshipped Hera as the goddess of childbirth. Because she is Eve, the first woman to bear children. Greek poets and playwrights placed the first couple in an ancient paradise called the Garden of the Hesperides, the Greek version of Eden. The Hesperides, or nymphs of the West, each represented different glories of paradise. Greek artists always depicted the garden with a serpent-entwined apple tree. In Greek art, the serpent is always pictured as accommodating and friendly. Genesis doesn't say what kind of a fruit tree it was. The widespread idea that Eve ate an apple comes to us from the Greek tradition. The serpent pictured here in Christian art is the same serpent we see on many ancient Greek vase paintings. To the Greeks, the taking of the serpent's fruit was a good thing. They revered and exalted the serpent for promising them immortality, and they welcomed the idea that they could ignore their creator and use their own reasonings to decide what was right and what was wrong. The Judeo-Christian tradition sees the taking of the serpent's fruit as shameful. The way of Cain sees it as glorious. Two contrary interpretations of the very same event, involving the very same humans with different names. In Genesis, we read of Adam and Eve's eldest son, Cain, killing his younger brother, Abel. The first man born to a woman committed fratricide. Greek artists sculpted Cain killing Abel on the south side of the Parthenon when it was built in 432 BC. But in 1687, the explosion of a store of arms inside the temple destroyed these revealing sculptures. This is what the south side of the Parthenon looks like today. Fortunately for us, a French artist, Jacques Carré, had sketched many of the destroyed Parthenon sculptures, including these 4 panels 9 years before the explosion. In the first panel, Cain, the taller and older brother, speaks with Abel. In the second panel, Cain argues with his wife over a sacrifice. From the Greek standpoint, the dispute with Abel caused problems within Cain's family. In the third panel, Abel is depicted as being in the field, his horses startled by an approaching figure. In the fourth panel, Cain kills Abel. This is Greek narrative art at its best and most revealing. According to Genesis, after Cain killed Abel, Adam and Eve had another son named Seth. That means Adam and Eve had 2 primary sons who each had offspring, Cain the eldest and Seth. Zeus and Hera also had 2 sons between them, Hephaestus the elder and Ares, each of whom had offspring. According to Genesis 4:22, the members of Cain's line were the first to become forgers of every tool of copper and iron. The Greeks deified Cain as Hephaestus, god of the forge. In the Greek system, Seth, the younger son of Adam and Eve, is Ares, the younger son of Zeus and Hera. Ares is the troublesome god of conflict and war. From the standpoint of Scripture, Seth is the good son, through whom the line of Christ is traced. Cain, on the other hand, is of the wicked one, a reference to his association with the ancient serpent called adversary and Satan. But the Greeks considered the association of Hephaestus with the serpent and his welcoming of the serpent's enlightenment to be good things. In the serpent-friendly Greek system, Where God is rejected and the ancient serpent's wisdom is revered, the viewpoint is reversed. Hephaestus, the deified Cain, is the good son. Ares, the Seth of Genesis, is the bad son. Zeus loved his elder son Hephaestus, but despised his younger son Ares, calling him, in Homer's Iliad, hateful, pestilent, and a renegade. From opposite viewpoints, Genesis and Greek religion share a knowledge of the same historical events. And they share a knowledge of the same characters, but again with different names. The Greeks depicted Seth men as centaurs, half men, half horses, almost always showing them bare-chested or wearing animal skins, often carrying a branch, showing that they belong to a different branch of humanity, the supposedly inferior line of Seth, as opposed to the superior, cultured, man-elevating line of Cain. Greek artists depicted the pre-flood descendants of Seth as brutal, as extremely hateful toward the line of Cain, as relentlessly hostile, vicious, and murderous towards the Cainites. Greek artists depicted the event that ultimately precipitated Noah's flood, the abduction of the Cain women by the Seth men. Genesis describes the abductions thus: "Seeing our sons of God, Seth men, the daughters of the human, Cainites, that they are good, and taking are they for themselves wives of all whom they choose." Genesis 6:2. Here we see a Parthenon sculpture showing a Seth man carrying off his chosen Cain woman as his wife. This vase painting also depicts the Seth man, the centaur, as taking the Cain woman he chooses for his wife. Before the Parthenon explosion in 1687, French artist Jacques Carré drew this Seth man seizing his Cain woman. From the west pediment of the temple of Zeus at Olympia, a Seth man carries off the beautiful Cain woman, Hippodamia. On this reconstruction from Zeus's temple at Olympia, another Seth man, the centaur to our right, carries off a Cain woman. This was the beginning of the end of the pre-flood world.